You were in the territorial?
I was a territorial and I joined up. I think it was the time of the crisis, and I think that was September 1938.
And as you were in the territorials, you immediately went into...
Well, I was at camp, actually, the annual TA camp at that time, the only camp I had ever been at. We went there in early August to Newcastle. I never got back.
And
we were shipped up to Edinburgh, and I was in the searchlights. When I see the searchlights, we all wanted to join something. And most of us didn't know what we wanted to join. The last thing that I would ever join again would be the searchlights, because it was a most inactive but not very pleasant type of job, because they shot down the beam, all the craft coming over.
Yes, yes.
One or two of our boys were killed that way because when they were navigating the beams onto the planes, you see the Heinkels or the Dorniers at that time, they shot down the beams and created quite a bit of havoc. But I was only there until June 1940, and the only thing I had seen in that time was I saw the first air raid that ever started in this country during the war. That was on the 4th. I think that was October 1939.
4th of October?
Yeah, well, it was October, I think. Was it the 4th?
Can't remember.
Well, it's near enough that date, probably about middle of October, because we would go down that afternoon to play a football match. We were about 2 miles from Queensferry, and there was another searchlight on Queensferry. And we were going down to play them a sort of five-a-side game. It was only to keep us occupied, because all we had done for 5 weeks was dig trenches, and we were sick of it. Mind you, we were, how should I say, we were strong enough at that time. We were all about mid-20s. I was 27, I think, 26. But anyway, that afternoon we were just about to start when over came the Heinkels, and one fellow looked up, I always remember him saying, "What's that?" And he was the spotter. He said, "Oh Christ, it's a Jerry." You know, the way he spat it out. And then off went the guns. But I believe that it was quite an experience. It was a good one for me, because it was quite a baptism. You know, there were 5 or 6 planes came over, and when you're only 2 miles from them, they were attacking the Navy on the 4th. In the 4th, actually. I don't know, they got quite a number, but what they got I don't know. But I only stayed there till June 1940, and I volunteered.
You volunteered
for the Middle East.
And what regiment did you join?
I joined an Army Observer Battery attached to I was a Royal Artillery, Army Observer Battery, and we were attached to the Air Force. And the idea being that we patrolled with the frontline patrolling vehicles, which would be the 11th Hussars or the KRRs or the RBs. They're all London mobs. Only once it was the Argyll Suffolk and Highlanders. But anyway, we used to pass back the enemy frontline positions if we were going to be attacked, if aircraft were coming over. That was our real bent. And we passed this back to the fighter drome, probably about 100 miles behind, maybe 50 miles. I didn't know, because they changed themselves as often as I changed too. And then they would come up with the fighters, you see, everything was done on a map. You know how you read a map, such and such well, we used to give the map position and the direction.
Yes.
And they would come up and intercept. Somebody out there and somebody on the other side, and if we all had the same idea, we should have a point of a mutual crossing point. So I had that until, I don't know, 1941.
And did you do basic training for that?
Oh, we did in Edinburgh,
No.
but it wasn't much, because we'd all been trained as observers.
And when were you posted overseas?
June 1940.
June 1940 was when you were...
Just the end of Dunkirk.
And where did you go first?
Middle East. I was in Egypt.
In Egypt?
We had a week or two there, basic, sort of initiating us into actually it's initiating you into the heat, because when it jumps from this country into about 100, 120. And British Army overseas service uniform wasn't just, it wasn't as light as one changed to when we got there, because it was quite heavy there, KD. Now the stuff we got in the Middle East was a lot better, but once we got, I suppose, our blood thinned out a bit, that was a lot better.
Yes. And so you were quite far up to the front lines?
Oh, we patrolled.
You were patrolling?
We were on patrol, that was our duty, and funnily enough, I did more, my work was mostly when there was no front line action. When there was a big push on, we weren't effective at all, because most of these divisions, well, it became a divisional affair, and they worked straight back to their HQ, I presume, in Cairo. We only did our typical work. We got in touch with our Air Force base, who would come up and try and protect the division. But then quite often these planes were more or less on I would think the Jerry planes, they were on a free run, as most fighters were. They had to be off for so many, they could only be off the ground for such and such a time. MiGs or Stukas, these 87s, so they had a minimum range and a maximum too, and from that, I don't know, I wasn't very sure of that part, but we carried on or just the same way. We had a mixed personnel, Army and Air Force, although we were attached to the Air Force, that was our main bent. But the Air Force, although we were mixed, the Air Force in turn were attached to the Army. So that you can probably understand it. And one or two of us got taken prisoner. I got taken prisoner myself.
How did that happen?
Well, you just go too far. I was along with the New Zealand division, and I think they went too far and they got surrounded and we got an awful... They put me, I was attached to a brigade headquarters. I suppose it was to try and give them some protection in a way. But when I say brigade headquarters, don't think that was behind the front line, because you can imagine a sea, and you could go anywhere. There was no such thing as somebody lying behind.
Yes, yeah.
They had a minimum of defence, but they were up near Bardia. I know they were out to strafe the enemy on his flank. I think they just did a wee bit too much, and they got quite a tanking, and I got taken prisoner of war.
Was this was by Germans?
Yes, it was the Germans. The Italians they couldn't take anybody prisoner. Oh no, one battalion of the Argyll Sutherlands or the KRRs could take on a whole division of battalions, and that's not a boast. That's perfectly true. Outnumbered 10-1, we still took them on, and there was no problems. They just fell. The Itai isn't he's not a fighting soldier, not really.
And so you were...
It was the Jerry who took me prisoner at Bardia, and I had a lot of mortar blasts that time. We were lying down on the ground. Naturally it was shelling us, and my truck was struck with a shell. I think it was a shell, I don't know, went fire anyway. I didn't look to see what started the trouble. And I just got into I don't think there was a hole there when I started, but there was a hole there by the time I finished. But there's a mortar burst about 5 or 6 feet from me, and this side, not the right, left side, this side, and I got mortar blast all down this side, but I was lucky because the chap next to me was killed. I'm deaf in one ear now permanently, my ear's blown out, but I had a bit of mortar shrapnel, not much to it, small stuff. But I was very lucky, maybe the way I was lying down probably, and Jerry mortars didn't burst the right way. They could go that way, you never knew the way they were going. British mortars used to go right out and cover a lot.
Yes.
So we had to walk 17 miles, I think it was, into Bardia. We were taken at 6 o'clock in the morning, and we arrived in Bardia at 8 o'clock at night.
Can you remember when this was?
21st of November 1941.
21st of November. And you were taken to Bardia and put into a prison camp there?
Well, it was a pen. It was a big 4-walled compound, that was all.
And were there a lot of other prisoners in it?
1,100. Mind you, that wasn't much. When you think there was maybe 500,000 troops on the move. But they were just as badly off as we were. They were getting hammered by our own division at the same time. There were about 7 or 8 British divisions on it in that time that I was taken. So if a division's got 30,000 men, you can see there'll be 250,000 troops on our side alone. And I think between the ITAs and Jerry, they must have had the same. So 1,100 men wasn't very much.
And it was a problem for food and...
Food. They were caught napping. They didn't think that the British troops would come round and cut their line of defence before they got food into Badia. Cut them right off. And the result was we had rather limited supplies, but it was adequate. We didn't die. They gave us 2 cigarettes a day. When I say that, it's all they had themselves. Maybe they had 4, I don't know. I saw a lot of German aircraft flying overhead, and they used to drop supplies. And a lot of the supplies was cigarettes, so they had a fair amount of food. We got a reasonable amount, but it wasn't very much. But as I say, we were inactive, and when you're inactive, your mind is inclined to think that you're hungrier than you really are. Because when you're busy, you don't think much about food.
And you were just kept in the prison camp for...
Well, this sort of compound, it was right, there was no roof or anything like that. It was only 4 walls, you had just to lie down in the concrete. But my wounds were festering a bit, they were angry. And I was taken out to what they called the hospital, which was the same compound at the other side with a bit of corrugated iron sheeting over the top. Oh, it was funny. I was there for about 4 days, and but my treatment was aspirin. I always remember that, aspirin to keep the temperature down, and that's all that, did nothing else. No, nothing to give us. But being fair to the German, he wouldn't have had any better treatment himself. One of our boys who was in the hospital, he was a New Zealander, he was awfully seriously ill. He had gangrene in the leg, as a matter of fact. And I was told this by one of the nursing orderlies after. And quite a number of the Jerry says, no, and don't give me my food, give it to the fellow, give it to the Englander. I mean, we're all England, we're all Scotsmen, they're all British.
Yeah.
And that's how decent the Jerry was. I don't think that I purposely liked him, but I didn't purposely dislike him.
I mean, as a soldier, he was...
Oh no, the German in the Middle East under Rommel was a very fine soldier, and I think we can safely say that we respected each other. And the result was there wouldn't be the same atrocities as you heard, and if you've read about the other parts of the German army. Rommel wouldn't stand for that. Everything was by the book. We got fleeced when we got taken prisoner as usual. You use your watch and your knife and everything like that. But all our personal stuff came back. We reported it to the officer, and the German officer, he made a point of saying that the Italians handed the stuff back, and I got my watch back. I mean, I was always...
There were Italians there as well?
Oh, they were mixed up. But they made a point of saying that we got our stuff back, and for that they jumped a great deal in my estimation. And even in the guard posts round our little compound, they were all done by Germans. The Italians, of course, they weren't considered soldiers even by the Germans.
Yeah.
And we used to say to them, it's all very well. They used to say, look at them. And we used to say, I know, we had them the first war. You have them the second. They said, well, nobody wants them the third. We don't want them. And this is a talk we used to have with them. And then I spoke a bit of German. Sometimes it was handy. You could speak to I couldn't remember all my schoolboy German, but I remembered enough that I could converse. But we came over to Italy in a hospital ship.
When was it?
Oh, I don't know. It would be about middle of December, I would think. Early
41.
December, 41. Because I don't know, it must have been about sort of the second or third week. Because we arrived in Barry, and I was kept there a few days. And then we travelled south to Brindisi, and we went into a transit camp there. And we arrived there the day before Christmas Eve, and that must be the 23rd of December, because on our Christmas fare from the Italians that time, no, I don't know, one of my own things, was an orange. And we used to think, we said, oh God, they were so hearty, they actually gave us an orange. But really, the Itais didn't have the food. They were in a... Would you like one of mine?
No, no. I think
You sure?
Yes, I'll have
But here, I'm wasting your time.
And
This is a lot of food. Talking like this.
No.
You got that straight there, good. But these are Italian, by the way. I go back every year.
They gave you an orange.
I give it an orange for my Christmas. Well, there was a bloody hearty, I've never forgotten it. I must have been there the week before Christmas, because you were there 10 or 14 days. I came up, oh no, that right now, because I came up to the camp with 2 days travelling. And I arrived in the camp about the 4th or 5th of January. And my God, we arrived in a place called Porto San Giorgio. Now I didn't speak Italian because I didn't know how to then. And we changed it, because I was a friend of this chap, Charlie. He spoke Spanish, and by speaking Spanish you can learn Italian.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, we found out we're going into a camp called Civigliano. In English it sounds like Civigliano, in Italian it's Civigliano. And Porto San Giorgio is about 30 or 40 miles south of Ancona. And I estimated that Civigliano would be about 17 or 18 miles right up into the Apennines. So you can imagine we were on the same parallel as Rome, the way Italy goes, but not on the same latitude. So we were there, I don't know how long, 42, 43. There was 2.5 years, I think, on it, wasn't it? 2 years or so. I don't know, I can't even tell you when we left there. A minute. Frank could tell you, because
I think it was 44.
I met up with Frank then.
That was
I worked on the post office.
PG
PG 59.
PG 59, yes. I think we've got that date.
Did they describe the barracks to you? There was an old barracks with 14 huts for sleeping, with 14 huts, 11 for sleeping, 1 as a store, 1 as a hospital, and 1 as a hall church. These are notes that I once made when I was a Boy Scouts I spoke out, but that's gone back 20 years ago. It was meant to hold 1,000 men, but it held 2,000 prisoners of war. Eventually we had 2 doctors, 1 dentist, 2 padres, and an RC priest came in from the outside. He was a, what do you call that order? The brothers. The brown habits. Franciscan.
Franciscan or Dominican, I can't remember.
No, Franciscan.
Franciscan.
And our food was excellent in the camp. We got half the Italian soldiers' ration, except if you were working. And even that wasn't very hearty. But the half the ration consisted of, we got coffee in the morning, there was no sugar in it. By 11:30 you got the big little meal, and that was what, a piece of cheese, smaller than that box of matches you've got, and a morning roll, a roll like a morning roll, they called it a loaf. And we had, this was supplemented by tea from our Red Cross parcels, which we were forced to hand in because we weren't getting parcels regularly at the beginning. We never got them regularly all the time, but we were always, in times of emergency, forced to hand our tea in, because a cup of tea in the afternoon with your meal, it meant so much. And anyway, the supper, as they called it, the cena, that was 4:30 to 5 o'clock, and that was the minestrone. Well, they called it minestra, and that was the little big meal, and you got a big ladle full of this soup in your Dixie, and that was it. But I must say, when we had Red Cross parcels in that period, when we got them, they did give us wood. And by utilising all our tin cans, we made blowers. Have you heard about the wonderful blowers we made?
No.
Oh, it was a wonderful thing. It was the ingenuity of people, it's amazing. It was a little thing that we used to put a canister like that, we dropped our rubbish in, and you lit it, and you turned a handle, and there was a fan which blew it along a channel, all made from tin cans that distance, and then on the other side was the Dixie.
Yes.
And that heat went straight up, maybe shorter than that.
Similar to a blacksmith's.
That's right. Very cheap. And that economised our fuel, the wee bits of wood that they used to sell us. And we made our tea about 7:30 or 8 o'clock.
I believe there was some wood was stolen as well in the camp.
Oh, I wouldn't know. Oh, off our beds. I used to take the slats off your beds. Then you had to pay for them. Oh, all these tricks. But they're typical of young men, actually. Looking back on it, I'm a lot older now. I wouldn't say I'd have done any different. It's not a responsibility. It's a case of the emergency demanded, and we weren't afraid to take it. The ITIs might have been different, they wouldn't have done it, but the British didn't give a damn, we just did it. Not without some respect for them, we knew we'd have to pay for it, but we accepted the punishment that came out. But we were there, and I think that was until summer of 1943. And then we were forced to work.
Yes.
So I was only 18 months in that camp. I thought I was longer. I've made a mistake in the date somewhere. There must have been 44. When did Italy come out of war? Was it 45?
No, I think it was 44.
Well, let's say it was 43. I'm sure it must have been 43 because we went to work then.
And what sort of work?
I know you on a farm.
Yeah.
No, farm was along with Frank Bailey then.
This the same camp, PG-59?
No, that we moved from PG-59 to this camp up in the north, and I think it was 121. I can't remember the number.
I think it was 142.
Was it 142? I won't find out.
It was something like that.
Aye. There was a pigsty. 2 concrete pigsties. And it was a big camp divided into 14 sections. And the sections were maybe 3 miles apart from each section. Otherwise, we supplied the farming area. And I think there'd be about 100 in our small working camp.
Yes.
And 50 to each pigsty, but mind you, they're very posh pigsties. Well, they were concrete with tiled floors. And that meant we had no bugs in the beds as we had in the other camp.
Yes.
Oh, bugs were the bane of our existence. You got eaten alive with them.
Just ordinary bed bugs.
Ordinary wood lice, wood bugs.
Mm.
And, but in this camp, that was the working camp. It wasn't, I would say. We were there for about May, June, July, August, September the Italians fell out of the war. We worked till the end of September, and then we had our 7 months on the loose. And the work was hard, but by Jove, it made us fit. By God, we were fit.
And the food improved?
Well,
we
were working on a farm then, and there was odd things came our way that I traded my 2-ounce bar of chocolate out of my Red Cross parcel, and for that I could get a kilo of cheese, maybe half a dozen eggs. Well, maybe it was wrong to trade your Red Cross parcel, but what a wonderful propaganda it was for Britain. The British prisoners could trade a quarter pound of chocolate. They hadn't seen chocolate for years in Italy. But by gee, we got a kilo of cheese for it and maybe half a dozen eggs. And Frank Bailey will always remember the time, one time we got 3 litres of wine as well, and he was terribly sick that night. He drank his vino because his stomach wasn't built for vino. It had been too much, and with no drink at all.
Yeah.
Vino it was an issue in the camp, but because some of the fellows got a bit intoxicated and, you know, ordered it up, it was stopped in the end. But that was the working camp in a way. It was good. We got up at 6 in the morning. I think it was 6. We left the camp about 6:45. We were on the farm at 7:30. I think we were ready to work at 7:30 because we worked from 7:30 until 12 o'clock. And we had a break from 12 till 2, and that's when we were supposed to be inside this. We had a bit of cover. It was pretty hot. You have an idea how hot it was. We couldn't work with shirts on. We were young enough to stand the sun, but you could almost get sunstroke. When we were tough and all as we were from even lying in the camp when we were basking on it. But we stopped. We worked again from 2, I think, until about 6:30 at night. And by the time we used to have a wash then. Just a light wash. I didn't wash myself. I didn't bother myself. Because we had a mile and a half to walk back to a couple of miles to walk back to our camp. And when I got back there, then I had a real wash. You know, I could get a bucket of water and thrown over me and get all the dirt taken off. And then you could wash your clothes. Sunday was the only day we didn't work. So that was about 7:30 to 6:30 in the morning to about 7:30 at night. Maybe it was a 12-hour working day. Maybe that was it. I'm not sure. Looking back now, it's kind of hard to remember. But conditions there were a bit easier. I remember the officer was a poet, an Italian poet from Sicily. It was a hopeless case. Hopeless. But he had the authority and he used it when he had to. But we got better off there. We did get the odd Red Cross parcel, but we weren't hungry. Hunger meant an awful lot, you know, but we weren't hungry there. And we had sufficient soap from our parcels to wash. Italian soap was hopeless. They didn't really have any soap. But we had our own KD I had it from home, my shirt and trousers, shorts. And most of us did have that. I don't know whether the Italians gave us initial shorts or not. Don't think they did.
So you managed to keep some of your equipment, some of your clothes and...
No. I arrived in Italy in my KD, khaki drill, and I had on my slacks and a khaki shirt, and I had my British warm greatcoat. Being Atrill, it was a short one. And boy, it was mighty cold when we arrived in December. I can tell you, I believe that probably I caught a bit of flu with that, or caught a cold with it, because I was issued out with an Italian uniform. I know what a difference it made to my body from the heat. At that time in the desert, some fellows have been issued with battle dress and some were still with KD. Well, with us being separated from our unit as we were, I don't know when it was issued, but it hadn't been issued by the time I was taken prisoner. But prison life was all right. But the working camp, I must say, I enjoyed. It was 6 or 7 months there of real hard graft, and it was great. Maybe 5 or 6 months, it was great, really, because we built up, we got rid of the softness out of our bones. You think nothing, at the beginning it was hard with a pitchfork. You're loading a cart with hay and you're unloading it and building a silo, and it's all chest, arms, and thighs. And it was great. It was bad at the beginning, but towards the end, within a matter of weeks, we accepted the whole lot. And then to keep us busy, they kept us working with girls because they could do a lot more work than we could. What's more, we let them. Oh, they were a nice lot of lasses. It wasn't bad. I've seen one since. I saw one about 5 or 6 years ago. She's a mother of 7 children now. But
she was quite young then.
Oh, I think she'll be about 18 then. She'll be late 40s, 50 now. it's about 3 years since I've seen her. She was still in this little place near where I was. But when the war finished, when the Italians came out of the war, we worked for this farmer for a while. But there was a certain restlessness, they were uneasy, they didn't know what was happening. But we all could see what was happening because of the Jerry troops that were going down. We heard the movements going down the road. And Britain was saying Italy will fall in 3 days, and by God, in 3 days and 3 nights there was nothing but tanks and guns on down that road, so we realised how Britain was going to take Italy in 3 days. It didn't. It took them about 8-9 months after that. Around about that, but it was till 1945 anyway. But anyway, that was more or less the working camp. And we were denounced there. And the Italians came with the padrone, that's the boss, and his brother, and they said, away you go anywhere you like, but get off.
This is the Italian troops?
No, the Italian farmer.
Farmer who was...
Aye, because they get away, they said, you're better working under an officer. And we went to hide in a house. I remember I had a sore leg, somebody else had something else, and anyway, the Jerrys picked up one of them up in the farm while I was down there. I remember this is about the day after the boss knew we were down there. And that was when we made our retreat, I suppose, if you call it that. We just had to scatter.
How many of you were there?
I don't know at the time. It varied. There's John Hamilton, myself. He and I stuck pretty close.
There's Frank.
Aye, but he didn't catch up at that particular time. Yeah. He only came later. I don't know where we got separated from Frank a bit. Not that it mattered much anyway, because eventually we were given shelter in a house for a short time, and Frank and Bill came and joined us there. And that was in the house of Giovanni, but I didn't even know his surname. He was a great communist. He'd been released from jail. He'd lived under he had insulted the Duce, the fascist. And we were there quite a few months. Oh no, we were in one or two places before we got to this house. And each time we went, the Jerry was always chasing us. We were in the church for a short time. I think that was right. Oh, I can't remember. But we were befriended by this Italian doctor whom we met later up in the hills. Domenico Lunghi. Dr. Domenico Lunghi, they call him a professore today. I see him every year I'm in Italy. I always go to see him. Yes. His family have stayed with me here. But he was of some assistance because I had a very sore leg. Oh, you got desert sores. It was lack of food. You came out in big yellow, not boils, but you could have the skin broke. It was terrible sore for days, and they put a piece of bandage on it, and the next day they would pull it, and out would come the kernel, and it would be like that. And you'd have a big hole in your leg, and it was like the root of a boil, but it wasn't. It was just one of these suppurating sores that lack of decent food. Well, of course, the Italians had them themselves. Yes. We were there for I don't know how long we were in that house under Giovanni, but he was denounced, Domenico was denounced, the priest was denounced, and I was very friendly with the priest because while we were working, I adopted the hobby of learning Italian. Yes. And once we stopped working, I was passable at it, but I got a chance to learn it more or less in this quietness of this place that we were, this wee house that we were in. And it was quite useful because I built up quite a good grammar knowledge, and the grammar is so important in Italian. I didn't have a great deal of vocabulary until after we were all denounced. I always remember it was March or February. and it was a hell of a time to get put out of anybody's house. We had been different places during the winter, I think. I can't remember all that bit, but...
By denounced, you mean someone
Oh, we were given away.
given it?
Oh, well, it was no secret. I mean, in a little village, they had to know where the British were.
Yes.
Not so much that, but they tried to keep it a secret. But you see, when there's in a house that where you were living quietly, somebody had to see food going in.
Yes.
Something strange would be happening. Well, the other people are bound to see it. We're in this house. We met up with another chap called Fred Pike and a fellow called Hamblin. We lost them after.
These were
There were 6 of us. No, one was from London and one was from Dorset.
Dorset.
The Londoner, Fred Pike, was a very nice chap. I liked him very much. But the other fellow, Hamblin, he thought a hell of a lot of himself, but then he hadn't been a prisoner long enough. I don't say he thought a lot of himself, but he was inclined to consider himself a wee bit, on the up and up. We had all had the maturity, I suppose, to try and accept a situation. However, Domenico, our friend, was denounced, and he took to the hills. We met him after there. Giovanni, whom we were living with in this house, he was denounced, and we left him. And I always remember about 1:15 in the morning. I need to read my diary here. I've even got the date. Wait a minute. I had to read this up tonight for the first time. I don't know when I read this before. 25 years ago. We left Johnny's house at 1:30 a.m. on Friday the 10th of March 1944. So that's the night. Oh, it was a wonderful night that, to get put out of the house. We were glad to get put out. Because when Jerry was on your trail, when we were in the church, he was after us. And then again we got in another place, he chased us. And then in this house, when Domenico was denounced and the Giovanni's, as they were denounced, there's a sense of relief to know that you either meet it and fight it,
yes,
or you do a bunk. But the wisest thing is not to fight, because we had nothing to fight with at that time. We did have in the September. Everybody seemed to find wee Colts. I don't know where the hell they all found them. But anyway, we managed to go. I remember we went along the old, at 1:30 in the morning. We hadn't walked very far before we were to sit down. The only thing I can say is that I need to read this diary now, because we go from village to village over the next 3 weeks.
yes.
And this is the hardest part, because I was ill.
Well, yes, please read it down.
I had a complication of the bowels at that time. I didn't know it. It had been an original wound. But I've said here, we left Johnny's at 1:30 p.m. and after walking for the first time for some months, we arrived, I think it was called the Vecchio Strada. I think it was called Oviedo. I'm not sure of the name now. But anyway, we had a long talk with these people. And when you're able to, when you were able to talk in Italian, it made a difference. And this particular night, we had our mind made up we weren't going to sleep inside anywhere. We didn't, even if anybody asked us, because Jerry was tightening up very considerably. Apart from us being in trouble, they would be in trouble, the Italians. So therefore, you can follow, if we got into trouble there and got away, nobody else would help us later on. So the motto was, keep alone, keep aloof. They would give you a little help, little food, provided you didn't overdo the hospitality. Well, as I said, I left this place. I think I can't even remember the name of this. Anyway, the second day, I can only read out again, it said, again in this place, this farmer was extremely kind. As a matter of fact, he had been a prisoner and he escaped off the train, and he managed to get down to this farm, and when he was tilling turning his hay over when we were there, a late crop of hay, and he knew what we were, so he let us stay at a big it was his maize that he had gathered together, and they stack it up in an unusual form. It's like a sow back, a cow back. In England they don't call it a sow back, it's a pig's back, but you know it's sow.
Yeah.
And we slept on one side where they were sort of bedded down there. It wasn't uncomfortable. They spoke away, help yourself. Do you drink? What would you like, beer, whiskey?
I wouldn't mind a beer.
Right, hold on, put your machine on for a wee.
Just carry on, it doesn't matter.
I did have a map. I haven't got it now. As a matter of fact, I threw it out a matter of 2-3 years ago. It was so faded.
Ah.
And it was a very detailed map of a local district. You know, it had been a sort of post office map.
Yes.
It gave the villages, such as walking. You can imagine there's a lot of villages in our own little maps that are our own maps that are not even mentioned. Well,
yeah.
It was mentioned in this one. It was a small one, and I treasured it for a long time, but eventually it fell to pieces, and we patched it up with paper and brown paper. It served no problem to me. It served no purpose to me. And I turfed it out because I'd been back to Italy so often. I've been about 8 or 9 times since then.
Yes.
And I've been over, not so much the old ground, I more or less see my friend, and I've gone back to see the priest in the church. He's still in the same old church. So I don't need to keep the map. It didn't fill any, as I said, it didn't serve any purpose, because by that time I was, well, you're driving around, I'm more interested in the main roads.
Yes, yes.
But to come back onto the story, when I said that this second day, that this farmer who had escaped, he gave us a couple of hot meals, and you know, they were a godsend, because when you're outside and you don't have a lot to eat, a hot meal means a lot.
Yes, yes.
And he gave us another one as we were leaving. And while we're in this field this day, that a lot of people came and spoke to us, and the Milanese were fishing in the local, it wasn't a river, the plains of Lombardy are so irrigated.
Yes.
There was a marsh at one time that they now form main sort of tributaries.
Yes.
And in these tributaries the fish for roach and perch. And they came and spoke to us, and they were quite nice people. I must say I enjoyed that.
Can you remember any of the names of the places at all?
I can't remember this particular place. No. This is what stumped me, but I've got all the rest down here. Because when we left there, I've just said here, Pedroni told us to come back in a month or so. He said, girare, and ritornare ancora una mese. Come back in another month. But I've got it down here. Our mind was made up. We decided to carry on and just try our luck, because.
And at this time there was.
The 4 of us.
Just 4 of you.
Oh no, there's 6 of us.
6 of you.
Because in that house up came this chap Pike and Hamblin, and I didn't know Hamblin really, and I didn't know Fred Pike well because he was in a different hut in the camp. But Bill Armott and I had worked in the post office in the prison camp.
Yes, yours.
He was one of my buddies, and Frank, he was a pal of Norman Bennett, and Norman Bennett and I, we all went to work together. And Johnny Hamilton, he was in the office, but he was a Glaswegian. I don't know if did you get him on the phone?
No, you didn't give me his phone number.
Oh, did I not? I'll give it to you after then. We'll phone him from here. I tried him on Friday night, but there's no reply. Anyway, these 6 of us were all together, and we tried to stick together. But we arrived at a place called Zvidio, Zvidio. It's just, these are only villages, because we didn't go near any small town.
No.
In all these small towns there were fascist posts, and fascist, well, it became a sort of armed police.
I see.
It was their job to control, but in the small villages they hadn't the number of people for that. I just said here, we arrived at this video after an adventurous night. We passed through, we bypassed two of the villages, I can't remember, small towns, and we could tell by the dogs that we were in trouble, so we kept away from them.
Yes.
And we bypassed another town that night called Melegnano. Now that's a very well-known place. Melegnano, Melengnano, Melegnano. I don't know, I can't give this. I think it's about 18 miles south of Milan. But it's a main Milan-Lodi road.
Yes.
Lodi. And we walked along this road. I remember it was bright moonlight. It must have been about 11 o'clock at night, because none of the people were allowed to be out at night. But you always get men out drinking in a pub in a wee village, and they came out of the pub as we were coming down the road. They got the fright of their lives. They didn't know who we were. They didn't know whether we were Germans or as they called us, Republicans. But we crossed a railway line and got onto this main road, and then we came up to, we got off at San Giuliano. Well, this is just a very small, it's a hamlet by the side of the road.
Yes, yes.
I said we were handsomely received and had plenty to eat. Well, the young chap of this house that we got friendly with, he was studying accountancy in Milan, and we struck up a bond. I was sort of interested in accountancy before the war, and I was interested in knowing that they had to take a degree, and they're called doctor. But an accountant in this country is just called Mister, as you know.
Yeah.
But that helped a bit, and because, and speaking again, being able to converse with them made things a lot easier. And I said, the moon is now getting lower and more difficult to walk at night. I said, at night it is very frosty, and sleeping dry is a problem. How we were, I was saying here, how we were sticking it after all these months was amazing. Well, we discovered a trick then. I could lie on the ground with a sack, if I could find a sack, about 4 times folded, with my coat on the top, and I put a pair of socks over my boots, and my feet were as warm as toast. But if I hadn't have done that, you know, your feet were like plates of ice, you know, they were very cold. But that was this place I was telling you about. And the next day, the reason we were having trouble at night when it was a very late moon rise, maybe about 2 and 3 in the morning, it limited the amount of kilometers, the number of kilometers we could travel, because I navigated my way by stars.
Yes, you were doing the guidance.
Well, I had the Starman's badge from the Scouts.
Yes.
And it was nothing to remember the plough and Orion's belt and the North Star, the Eastern Star, the South Star, Little Bear, the Big Bear, the Wee.
Yeah. So if you were not
well, I said with
you did the navigation by the stars, but you also were assisted by some sort of Italians now and then.
Well, we used to say to the Italians, where are the fascists? Where's their posts? And they would say, so many kilometers ahead, there's such and such a village. And I would say, where is it? And this would be during the day. Well, at night time, you see, I would take a bearing. And at night time, I'd pick my stars. And then by doing that, we bypassed. We didn't walk on roads.
No, you went cross country.
Cross country, tracks, paths. Anyway, naturally the easiest way for us. But as long as we could keep bypassing, and we never moved much further than 10 kilometers, it was as much knowledge as the Italians had themselves. It's true.
They didn't know any further?
No. They're very limited in their knowledge that way. But that first or second night, as I said, when we left, this chap had been a POW. It was well, we had to wait till about 2 in the morning, so we couldn't travel very far. But we arrived at a place called Bettola, Bettola, and I've got here after a terrible night of wind and rain. And the rain went off just about an hour before dawn, and we got into a dry fossil. Now, they call it, it's not a fossil, fossi, I think I forget the name. This is what I meant by the plains of Lombardy are so irrigated, they control the water. A fossil was the drain going around a field that they would flood, that they would fill to flood the field to, you know, to get the crops to grow. And they cut them off when they didn't need them. Well, we stayed in one, and we pinched some, I think we got hay. We didn't pinch the hay, we just took hay, and it kept the wind off you from the top, and a windbreak down, so we were in comfort. And I've got here, after a bad beginning, we had more than we could eat. Remember, we weren't eating very much, and your stomach contracts. So we had as much as we could eat. I wouldn't say what we were eating. It was more in the cheap Italian food. Polenta. Polenta is ground maize and water. Like a porridge. And this was their statutory diet there. We didn't get any meat or chicken or pork because they had none themselves, of course. We got odd cigarettes, but I wasn't a smoker then. I got sick of the cigarettes. I said here, I thought we were going to stay the night in a hayloft, but the Padrone's wife actually took fright. They'd actually had a bit of fear of that, and he sent down 2 or 3 bales of hay, straw, and we banked up this fossil and stayed there the night. The people were comfortable. They came and spoke to us. I always remember that during the night. And I remembered that I got hold of an Italian phrase then. Quando ci non è più è finito. It's a phrase, and that just means when there's no more, it's finished. And this sort of fellow was offering us cigarettes, and this was the last of his tobacco. And he turned round to it was either Bill or John. He said, have a cigarette. And we said, oh no, you've got none left. He says, fa niente. Quando ci non è più è finito. When there's no more, it's done. And it was quite descriptive because it was fatalistic, you know, he accepted that part. I thought it was rather nice anyway. This is the sort of treatment we did get, because the country people are way up in the north, they had no more interest in the war, or fascism for that matter. They were too poor, and too, I would say, not illiterate, but uneducated. Better education would have taught them more. We arrived the next day at a place called Biviaca. I'll try not to waste your time here. We stayed the day in a dry fossil. Out of the sun it was very cold. Had a fair amount to eat. Obviously my stomach was my guide here. And at night went to a hayloft for a few hours. I remember this was just this chap said, come on into the hayloft, it was terribly cold. And this chap gave us a route that was going to take us over a railway line. To us this was so important because it was almost cutting across the whole north of Italy. In any case, we managed to get a route and keep clear of the Republicans and Jerry, and we arrived at a little hamlet again called Cornago. And they had little bothies. You know what a bothy is? Well, they were made of straw in fields. In other words, they kept some of the tools there, or they used it for maybe their animals. Anyway, we used it to sleep in. We only travelled at night, as you know, and we stayed there during the day. And generally during the day we went into one of these if we got the opportunity. We knew that somebody would come during the day. We just hoped it would be the right person. But I've just said here, people were very nice and full of courtesy. Frank was sick and not too good. I bet he's forgotten that. It was great to have a roof over our heads, and we were told that from now on there were plenty of these casinots, so we knew we could look for them.
They were the casinots were.
In each field, like bothies.
And
we knew that by moving all the time, we just watched where we're going, we could always get in one during the day.
Yes, I see.
It was easier that way. I've said here, all were small, and ours had a little window. And the people had little or no interest in the war except to be free. Anyway, the next day we arrived at a place called Massate, Massate. Is this boring, by the way?
No, it's fine. This is what we want, actually.
And we arrived there early morning, and we stayed all day in a chicken in a hayloft. The best place. We had been fairly well treated the day before, but I was very sick that night. It was my turn this time. And I remember Frank having been ill, and that's right, and this was the night that I took ill, and I just couldn't walk that day. So in this chicken and hayloft, we'd got upstairs and got into it, and there was a long discussion on between the six of us. Hamblin and Fred Pike, they wanted to beat it. They felt the best chance they had was either going south, and I've just said here that I cannot understand him, and neither can the others for that matter. But
this is Hamblin.
Hamblin, I had an operation later on, you see, this was my trouble. But we stayed there. I couldn't go out, I couldn't move the next day. I wasn't I wasn't well enough. So they left during the night, and it left the four of us there the next day, and we left the next night. I said here, Bob and Fred went off by themselves. During the day we had plenty to eat, during the day we had nothing to eat. I've crossed it out. As it was too dangerous. We were very close to the Republican town of Terzo, Terzo. I said again, was very sick and not too well. I slept all day, and at night decided that my fighting days are over, and if I couldn't get into Switzerland, then I wouldn't join the partisans again. No wonder. It was rather a rotten feeling. They took 10 feet of intestines out in Switzerland, so you can probably see how I just wasn't maybe feeling the best. Anyway, we left there and we arrived at a little village called Rancello, Rancello, and we spent the day in the woods. And when they say woods, they were only like raspberry bushes, maybe about 8 feet high, 10 feet apart. And the people, again, I would say that they were very ignorant, but full of kindness. They didn't have much to eat themselves. They came and talked to us. I think Frank got a haircut that day. But anyway, we left Rancello at 11 o'clock in the morning, by the way. And we walked up a fossil. And they said it was quite safe to walk during the day by this time, and we arrived at a village called Bushnago. And I always remember on the way, we tried to get somebody to give us something to eat. He says, I've got nothing to eat. We said, oh, surely you can give us something. He said, well, come in, look. And he took us in a place about this size. He said, see if you see any food here. He says, I won't get food until I get back tonight. I've got no food. The man was honest about it. He had nothing to eat himself. However, we slept in his hay shed that night, and a good job, because I've got here. It was very cold. We were very hungry, because we hadn't had much to eat all day. And I've said here, then at 7 a.m. we left and walked through a town to a place called Colnago, Colnago. You
walked through Colnago?
Well, we walked through this town of Rancello. It was only a village.
Yeah, but larger than
that's right. And there was people would be looking at us, but they didn't bother their head by that time. Where after a disappointing reception, we ate very well and bought some wine. I remember that day. I had caught a cold and I wasn't feeling very well. But we had a few liras. In fact, we had about 5,000 lira between us, and that time was a lot of money. That was worth about £30. It was about 72 to the pound, so 5,000 you can gather. It wasn't, when I said 30, maybe it was worth a lot less, but the lira was rising. Well, we managed to buy wine. Wine was good for us. We realised there was some strength in wine where we couldn't get, because they had no coffee.
Yes.
Anyway, we arrived at this place called Verderio. This is a place I'll never forget. And it says here, after a difficult night, no moon, no stars, only our sense of direction. And I said, my cold was very bad, oh perso. We were, after an initial setback, I remember this, we were sitting in a wee field, again beside a casinot. And this chap came over and spoke to us. And he said, what's your trouble? They said, oh, I've been a prisoner too. He said, would you care to come over to my house and have a meal? And we thanked him and went over to his house, and I don't know whether we had a wash here. I think we'd... that's right, we had a meal, and after the meal we were taken down to the byre, the cow shed, and they slept beside the cows and the pigs. And because I spoke a bit of Italian, I've got down here, I went to the local pub with the two brothers, and I had half a litre of vermouth and listened to the BBC. Slept in a byre with the cow's donkey. It was very comfortable. I was pretty talkative after drinking half a litre of vermouth in the pub. But by the time I came back, they told me that it was a lovely warm night, and they gave us a beautiful meal. It was more a risotto. And you know, risotto's got meat, chopped liver and all that, and it's very tasty. And in the country there, he must have killed a pig. But they never told you.
Was he as poor as the people?
No, this chap owned this farm, but it was a very small farm.
Yes.
But nevertheless, he had some food. I said here, we stayed all day in the house, eating, smoking and playing cards. They didn't want us to move that day, because having been out the night before, my name must have gone abroad, because they said, they gave me a cloak and a cap, and there were 3 bicycles, and I was in the middle of them, cycling.
Yes.
But despite the fact that I spoke a bit of Italian, my accent was so British, even in the pub. They knew that I was, they called me, they knew I heard the words Inglese, but I heard the BBC there. It wasn't much I heard, the usual war bulletin, but it was nice. But the only time speaking Italian paid dividends. But we came back, as I said, we stayed all day in the house playing cards, and from a security angle. And we left at 10 o'clock at night with a very good send-off. I just said here, the people have been very kind, and we're very sorry. We were sorry to go, but it was from security. We thought it best we should do this. I think they thought we might stay on, and we're a bit frightened, but we were too good-mannered not to realise our position. However, the next day was another eventful day. We arrived at a place called Inversago, I-N-V-E-R-A-C-G-O, and this was a wonderful day. We got into this casinot, and it wasn't long before the people realised we're British, and half of the village came down. And then they brought down the local barber, and Bill and Frank and Johnny, they had a shave and a haircut. I had a haircut. I think I'd shaved the day before. Every man to himself, you know, we all suited ourselves.
Yes.
They washed our clothes for us and dried them. We weren't dirty. Actually, they caught me. I always remember it. I was stripped to the waist, having a wash and the wee burn at the side. And when this man came over and said, "Voi siete inglese?" Talking to the crowd of us, and I said yes. However, it was very friendly. They brought over some bread and the cheese and wine. Well, you might not believe it, but during the day they brought over 16 litres of wine. Now, as you know, I'd been sick. I didn't particularly like the wine, but I do now, in a big way. I didn't take very much, I had very little. I don't think Bill Ammett took much wine, but between Frank and Johnny, they got rid of about 12 litres. And Frank was well away, so was Johnny. You could always tell the two because they're big red faces. However, I just said, well, I've said Bill and Frank were pretty muzzy, but Johnny was muzzy. And John not too bad. We stayed again at Inversago overnight. As I said, we got our clothes washed the next day. We all had a haircut from the local barber. In the morning, I had a good wash and a rub down at a spring. We got milk and bread for breakfast and again plenty of vino, and we left at 8 o'clock at night this time because coming near the border, as we thought, or coming near the area of,
Yes.
well, I forget the name of the place. It was one of the places from Milan, a train stop. Jerry was always near the railway line. Anyway, we arrived at a place called Calco. And we didn't eat all day. We had nothing to eat. We had to crawl along. We moved along the hillside. We stayed there all day with nothing at all, and we moved along again along the hill, only a couple of kilos from to a place called Rovagnati, but the names don't mean anything to you, do they?
Well, we can trace the route, you see.
Oh well.
This is what we want to try and...
Well, Rovagnati, Rovangnate. I said after walking from Calco, we were very tired and we slept till 1 p.m. I can always remember that because it was a beautiful spring sunshine.
Yes.
And we managed to get behind a wall which broke the wind, and we had that 3 or 4 hours sun sleeping, and that's as good as a meal because it got some heat into us. We met a Republican soldier this time when we wakened up. He was on a bicycle. Johnny had a big rock in his hand, but in case naturally we're going to be attacked. Bill, I don't know, Bill had something in his hand. What was a mallet or something? But the Italian soldier, the Republican soldier, he stopped and he wished us good luck. Actually, he knew we were British, all right. He said he was only in the war per forza. It was made going.
Yeah.
And he said to us, don't, he gave us a direction to bypass, I forget the name of this, one of the villages, one of the bigger villages where there was a Jerry outpost. And I said to him, we actually stayed overnight. And I've got here where we only travelled 1 kilometre. I don't know, it was on the hillside. We were frightened because we'd bypassed the Jerry post during the night and we were hungry all day with nothing to eat, and we watched Jerry passing by on the road below. Now on the road below would only be a matter of 100 feet, 150 feet up, but we were, because of the sort of bush, we were pretty safe because they only kept to the roads.
Yes.
That night we left and walked to a place called Bossizio, Bossizio, and we stayed in a casino all day until 4 p.m. Now this is where we contacted the resistance, the people who gave assistance. We tried to contact the contraband people.
Yes.
Because there was a lot of smuggling went on. And at 4, I remember we spoke to 2 wee girls who came past this casino this day, and Bill says, go on Jock, I mean have a word with them, ask them about this, I forget what he called it, but Bill always had a bit of humour. And I went out and spoke to the girls, and they said, well, I said, could you find out who does the contraband here? Anyway, about 4 or 5 o'clock, this man came over and started questioning us and asked us all the various questions. Well, he said, I'll help you tonight. Come along, and he gave us the route to come to this house, which we went about 6 or 7 o'clock. And when we got in the house, he said, have you got a pay book? We said, no. Have you anything to identify yourself? He said, oh, you don't need to. We said, why? He said, you've got British Army boots on. He said, I know you're coach, but he said, no British soldier gives his boots up, and that was quite true. Boots were most important to us because they kept us alive. But that's how we got in touch with these people, and we're on our way by 8 o'clock that night, and this was the hardest night's walk I think we'd ever done. We walked along the head of a little lake called Suello. I could always remember that, S-U-E-L-O, Suello. And I can't remember, it was just at we don't know, I can't remember the name of the village, but we were told that after having walked maybe, I think it was about 2 kilometres or 3 kilometres, we would meet a man smoking a cigarette. He'd have a cap on, and he would say to you, are you going to karate? And we would say, yes. Anyway, that was the guide. Now, you might not believe us, but he took us over 2 ranges of Alps that night. Now, he didn't go up and down, but he went up, and it was jet black. There wasn't one bit of moon, there wasn't a bit of moon, there were no stars. There were some stars, but only for a short time. And I remember Bill said to me, which way we're going, Jock? And I've got down here where I thought we were going north. Anyway, and I know we got to the top of the hill, and he said, we'll stop for a rest. And I said to them, what are we doing now? Well, he said, we're trying to go along the top and down a little and up and over the next lot, a range of hills, and down to Lake Como. Well, we did. Now, we got to Lake Como. I haven't got the time here, but it must have been about 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the morning, so we had a solid walk from 8 o'clock at night with nothing to eat, nothing to smoke. We had one rest. Good job we were young and fit, but by gee, he was fit. And we got to the side of Lake Como. We couldn't cross the lake just at that particular minute. He had to contact his pal who had a boat. Remember, they were getting so much money per head, I don't know the amount, for every prisoner that they managed to save. Because the reason we couldn't go, the German patrol boat went up and down the lake, and we had to cross in between the times it had passed. And when we got across the other side of the lake, dawn was breaking, and this chap was waiting, a big tall chap, and he said, oh, you don't need to worry here, you can walk during the day. It was 6 o'clock in the morning, I always remember that time. And we were going straight up at the side of a mountain. It was a paved path. But I was on my chin strap then, because I don't know, I hadn't been sick the night before, but this was taking its effect. And I always remember Bill, I think it was Bill who helped me up the last lap. I could hardly walk. I asked Johnny to help me. But the first time I always said to the story ever came out to me, 2 up and 1 back. Every 2 steps I went forward, I slipped back 1. And I think it was Bill who came along at that time. Anyway, we went into, maybe about 1,500 feet up this hill, maybe 1,000. I wouldn't know the height. Again, there are these even farms up in these hillsides. They kept the cow inside. The cow couldn't get out because it was all hillside. It was all, there was nothing to eat. It's all rock. But we arrived at Karate, and after an all-night walk from Suello, S-U-E-L-L-O, very tired and slept all day. Well, we slept all day until about 1 or 2 o'clock, and they left us 2 big Italian biscuits, that would be about 8 by 8 and about almost an inch thick. Terrific thickness of it. There was no goodness in them though. And they left us that with some cheese, and we ate that and drank water with no coffee. And then at 8 o'clock at night, they came up. This chap, Italian fellow, came back with somebody else. And they had come from Milan, and they said civilians were joining us. Well, I'm only sorry I've forgotten the name of this. I've said Bozizio. No, not Bozizio, no. Karate. I've forgotten the name. I've had a map I could have remembered. Anyway, there were about, I think it was 5 Jews or 7 Italian Jews came from Milan, and they arrived at about 11 o'clock at night, because we were on our way by 11:15. Oh, they wasted no time, and we had about an hour and a half's walking, and we brought up the rear, because the civilians weren't very clever, and we were determined if there was going to be any trouble, we were spreading. I was with Johnny Hamilton. Johnny had been a commando, and we kept Bill and Frank back, and so we said we would hold up the rear. Anyway, we had no trouble. We got right up to the wire, and there was we had to go quietly past one of the Italian barracks. They never even bothered to have a guard on at night, and we crawled under the wire. And the Italians, the civilian Italians, they came under as well. And we were bowling down a hillside. We missed the pathway. Anyway, we managed to get back onto a pathway, and the Swiss guide caught us there, and the Swiss army. And Bill, he got on quite well. I think the first thing he got from one was a cigarette. But they took us down to, I've got here now, there was a village about 5 kilometers north, maybe south of Chiasso. Southwest of Chiasso, because we walked that 5 kilometers down, and Chiasso was a frontier town, and we passed the frontier, and the Italians were sort of frightened that the Italian soldiers might fire at them from the other side. But I've no doubt the Italian soldiers on the other side were envious that they couldn't join us. However, we met up in this place, Chiasso. We met up with all the Italian civilians. When I say that some had come from the north of Italy, some had come from the north of Africa. How they'd all got, there were some Romanians there, and I got on well with one fellow. I didn't really like him. He was a lawyer. He was a Jew, and I'm not against Jews. In fact, one of my best friends here is a Jew. But some of these continental people have a mean streak in them, and they always think you're out to do them, you know. And he called me ragioniere, an accountant. I said, I'm not an accountant, I'm interested in accountancy. But he had terrible manners. When we sat at the table, I think it was either Bill or Frank said to me, my God, he said, look at this. And he actually had the potato on his fork and a knife, and he was taking the jacket off his potato as if he was peeling an orange. Well, that's true. An advocate, a lawyer. This shows you that a lot of the Italian people, they think they're well up, but they haven't got our breeding. And for that we were always grateful we were British, because you've got mannerisms, you don't realise you've got them. But when you meet the Continentals or other people, then you realise just how well we're lucky to have been British, and we felt this all along. So we went to a place called oh dear, wait a minute, Bellinzona. That's a well-known place in Switzerland. Now we were more or less kept there for internment to see if we had any disease. We got rid of our chatties there, lice. We got rid of all that. And then we moved up to an internment camp at Olten, O-L-T-E-N, which is a well-known place in Switzerland. Well, it was about 3 or 4 kilometers up in the hillside, but it was a very nice hotel we were in. Empty, by the way. It was only a barracks as far as we were concerned, but it was very nice, and we were well fed, and we were encouraged to walk in the afternoons. But my trouble caught up with me there, and I took very sick, and I've said here, if I may go back to Bellinzona, I said it went today and had a hot bath, and a hair cropped, complete fumigation. It was fine to feel clean again. Left at 12 midnight for Alton. Well, Johnny and I were sharing the same shower, Johnny Hamilton. It was a lady attendant, and we were busy jumping around Bearscuddy, and she says, "Come on, hurry up." But we were enjoying the hot water so much, we were the last to leave. I recall that, but she didn't give a hoot, didn't matter to her, didn't matter to us either. But I said we arrived at Alton at 5 o'clock in the morning. That's where I met my first Russians. And I met a lot of Frenchmen there. I wasn't impressed with the Russians. I met a lot more later on, and I was less impressed even as I met them. I didn't meet any of the officer class, but I did meet the ordinary fellow like myself, the soldier, and he wasn't well educated. He was working class with a limited education. And again, it stood out how much it was either, we met Yanks there too, but the Yanks were like ourselves, they've got a fair amount of education. But the Russian was quite as crude, but they were big and heavy, and no doubt of that. But they weren't bad-mannered. They weren't rude. When I say they weren't rude, they didn't do anything to hurt us. They were endeavoured to be friendly, but they ate like pigs. You know, well, very uncouth the way they did things, you know.
Yeah.
I'm just in here. Well, there wasn't very much to do. I'm just here, and this was on, now I've got to here, Sunday the 9th of April. So we've travelled a long way. 1944. From about the 10th of March, on the 10th of March. I was pretty sick this day, and I had to keep to my bed. The bed was straw on the floor. I wasn't any better at night, and the orderly made me sleep in the sick room. After a little opium, I was sick again. Now, I always remember the next day, Frank Bailey came and shaved me. I'm not pleading this. This is just wee things that stick in your mind.
Yes.
I wasn't any better the next day, and I had to walk into this civilian doctor in Alton, and oh boy, I was in trouble there because I couldn't walk. I was sick every 100 yards. Anyway, he said when he put it down to a stoppage of the bulb. I think I had a splinter there as well. And I went to this military hospital where they tried to give me an injection. It didn't make any difference. And 3 days later I was still sick, and they carted me through the village. And Zoffingen's the name of the village, Zofingen. And I had an immediate operation. I took out 10 feet of my intestines, and I still see that doctor. I stayed in Zofingen 1969. Only this time he was my guest. Other times I've been his guest. But this time I said, I wrote him before I left, I said, book me up in the Sterling Post. And a friend, a neighbour of ours, and I said, you're my guest for that night. And anyway, I'm no longer, he's no longer a doctor, we're friends now, you know. And he's always tickled when he meets me. Because we have great fun, and he says to me, you should be as fat as me. He's not much older than me, you know.
Yeah.
But it came out in conversation, funny enough, the last time. Jim, my neighbour, said to me, does the doctor remember your operation? Does he remember the time he operated? And I said, oh, I was just one of his ordinary cases, I suppose. And he interrupted and said, Tommy, I was Tommy Atkins. That's the British soldier's name. I remember every minute of it. Because I was a unique case, because they expected I would die. They gave me 3 days to live, and I didn't die, as you can see. I'm still here, but that more or less contributed. I had about 7 or 8 months in Switzerland. It was more or less recuperation.
Yes, and then you were flown home.
No, we didn't. We came home, and I didn't come along. I was away from the rest of the boys by this time.
Yes.
I was with the military headquarters in Ville. I was just used at clerical work, and I was in civilian digs. Of course, everybody was in civilian digs, anybody who was working. I think Bill and Frank were on a farm.
Yes.
Anyway, Bill came and stayed with me just before we went home. and my landlady liked him, and Bill picked up German very quick. But this time I had learned a lot of German because in 3 or 4 months living in civilian digs, my landlady couldn't speak. My landlady couldn't speak anything but High German, Hochdeutsch.
Yes.
Swiss German is a very difficult German to speak, but I would say, was ist das? And she would say, das ist ein Buch. And I had to keep saying, das ist ein Buch, until I had it right. Or, das ist Butter, for butter. Das ist Brot. And then she would start and keep me right grammatically.
Yes.
Well, it wasn't I was all that good. I was passable. But Bill came by, Jove, he had picked it up very quickly, and we were there until, I think it was about the 14th of October when we came out. And of course there's the last pass I had from Switzerland. It let me go to, I think it was to Zurich. And we came out, and we came by train to Geneva, and then we went on to the French cattle trucks, and we went from there, Geneva to Marseille, and that's where I had the biggest laugh of my life. I always remember all the POWs like myself came out and were sitting along the quay at Marseille, and it had been blown for a 6, you know, and the Yanks had all their stuff piled up here, and the shells were all in their packing cases, and we were all sitting on top of the cases having a smoke, and this Yank was going absolutely crackers. He said, you'll have the whole, you smoke, you'll have the whole bloody long up. Somebody says, oh, shut up for Christ's sake. You know, he said, you've never seen a shot fired in anger. And it was quite true, he hadn't. He said, what are you talking about? He said, where's your, you've got to fuse them, you see. Where are your fuse caps, you bloody fool, you see. I said, what's all this shutting up? They said, go off, you couldn't even put them off, you put a bomb in them. But we had a funny experience coming out this trip. That morning, we drew up in this from Geneva to Marseille. It took 3 days, and we heard voices on the other side of our cattle truck, and it turned out they were Americans. And we all got out and started speaking to them and said, oh, where are you going? Oh, they said, oh, we're going up to the front, we're going up to the front, we're going to this. And we said, oh, somebody's you're welcome to it. He said, so where are you going? We said, we're going home. Why are you going home? Well, we're all prisoners of war. And you know, the change right over. What like is it when you go into action? What do you do? How do you defend yourself? What like is it when you're a prisoner? And you tell them, you know, you don't come away any bull, because a man's life's at stake. And you give them the best advice you can do. And we told them what we thought of their emergency rations. That's what they were feeding us on. They said, I know, we think the same too. But we had, I remember we had a chit chat with them. So that was all. I just came home in this, we went to Naples in this troop ship, and we picked up all the other boys who had been in, I think Frank was one of them, and Bill. They were in the camp at Naples, but I didn't get off the boat. They had gone before me, I think.
I think they've flown home.
Were they flown home?
I think so.
Oh, well, I wasn't.
I'm not sure.
Because our next stop was Gibraltar. And this was about the, I don't know, was it the 7th of November? It was, maybe it was a wee bit late in October, but it was 7th of November. And I had my last sunbathe. And then this tummy started. It wasn't too bad, but I was on a special diet because I was to watch my food. And I was eating in the hospital, and I was considered the weak one, but you know, you'd be walking along the deck, and all the boys were sitting up there. Some would be all right, some would going, oh, you know, I don't care if the bloody ship goes down, I don't care if a U-boat attacks it, oh God, I wish they would sink her. They're all seasick, you see. Oh, and you heard this going on all day long, and suddenly we were in this, with 3 frigates guarding us, and on the starboard side, up went the black pennant, and that meant U-boats, and our boat heeled over, and this frigate who was in the port side swung up, and the other 2 came over, and they were chucking depth charges right over. This is the Bay of Biscay. Well, you know, for 10 minutes nobody was seasick, no one. And 10 minutes later, when they'd all settled down, I would say afterwards, all of us said, oh God, I wish that, oh, I miss Barry, you know. that was typical life. Proves that seasickness in some cases is mental.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just caught up with Frank after that, I think. I met him in Newcastle, in a rehabilitation centre, and we arrived I think we arrived the same day at the Paycor. I've never seen Bill Arnott since.
So you eventually got home. When would it be? You were in the rehabilitation centre and then...
Oh, I was home, I think, about the first week of December. And 1944, because we were sent to the Paycor in January 45, the end of January.
Yes.
And I remember it was I think it was April 45 was VE Day. The European War finished. And Frank and I had an awful piss up that night. We stopped a police car to get a lift home. We got the lift home all right. Halfway on, quite well, some happy moments. But that's about all I can recall about it. It's not so very much. I don't remember of course I suppose I'm maybe more solemn-minded. I don't remember so much of the funny bits, you know, but you'll find it when Bill Arnott had a great sense of humour.
Yeah.
But
did you ever know what happened to the other two, Fred Pike and...
No, and I didn't
Bob?
care.
No, you never did find out then?
Well, no, I'll tell you why, how I felt, and the other boys may not remember at the time. I wasn't fit to walk. They left me.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were determined. They didn't want to be hanging on to us.
Yeah.
And while we were all going north, I tried to find out, and that's wrong of me to say I didn't. I did try to find out, and we did hear that one chap was taken a prisoner, but we had no authority to prove what we heard. That's about all. But I didn't think very much of them leaving. Looking back on it now, but they were they were every man for himself.
Yeah.
And they weren't missed. In fact, we were better as a 4 than a 6. There was one time we thought of splitting up as a 2. Johnny and I, and we said to Frank and Bill, well, now that we're so near the border, if we're going to contact the contraband people, how about going off in 2s? And Bill and Frank must have had a wee bit of a talk about it, because they came back and said, well, if we've got to split in 2s, Frank and I are not going to be together, because we need a bloody searchlight to get us up the road, on the road to Switzerland. So John and I, although we were from this city, were friendly enough that we didn't want to part. So we stuck as a 4. It came out very well in the end.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, when Frank came on the phone there, he says, hello Frank, hello Jack, this is Frank speaking. I said, oh hello, how are you getting on? And this was after 27 years, just, you picked up the traces and through thick and thin. I mean, a friendship like that, under hardship, it lasts, to the end of time as far as I'm concerned. I'll always be able to meet him. Well, as Gladys sends up a box of sweets, I've only met her 3 times. But Frank's got he was a good scout, Frank. Very kind-hearted, a wonderful nurse. If anybody was sick, Frank would attend to them. Bill and Johnny, well, that's about all my story. I'm only wasting your time. Do you want me to look at the map?
No, sorry.
Very much.
One other thing, were you courting your wife then? No.
I didn't meet my wife until I came home that first time, because I went to church. I was keen in the curtain, I was singing in the choir, and they gave me a wee presentation, and she was there. But I didn't really start going with her until about, another 18 months after that. I didn't get married till 1940. Oh God, when was it? 1949. It must have been. Yes, it must have 49 ago. Aye, because my twins were born in 1950. That's right.
Yeah.
So that's about all.